On a scorching summer day, Yu Otosaka explains about his supernatural ability that allows him to possess the body of other people just by thinking about them. He further clarifies that his mind can be transferred into another body, but only for 5 seconds, and during those 5 seconds, his own body falls unconscious. Initially, he would use his powers on those who angered him, initiating quarrels before promptly returning to his own body. Despite the limited impact of possessing someone for a mere 5 seconds, he eventually discovered the perfect use for his abilities. In class, the teacher announces the finishing time for the exam. Yu uses his powers to possess every smart student in his class and copy their answers. On result day, everyone is in shock after seeing Yu top the class. Yu then plans to attend the most prestigious high school that faces a difficulty as he cannot predict the intelligence of all the unknown students at the entry exam, so he disguises himself and researches all the students planning to take the exam in different schools. Eventually, Yu gets the highest score in the entry exam and is asked by the administration to deliver a few words. While Yu is elegantly speaking, all of the girls are in awe. He becomes a famous entity at school, and with it comes a lot of attention. After class, Yu meets a fellow student who invites him on a date, but Yu tells her about his busy schedule and rejects her. He reveals that the only girl he will date is the Madonna of his school, Yumi Shiranagi. When school ends, Yumi leaves with her friend and plans to visit her favorite restaurant. When the two of them reach a cross, Yu takes over a truck driver and tries to run her over. 5 seconds quickly pass, and Yu saves Yumi before the truck could hit her. After taking her to the school clinic, Yumi invites him to join them for lunch. As all of this happens, a mysterious entity records Yu from afar. The next day, the student council president Omura summons Yu and explains to Yu that he has been accused of cheating on the entry exam. He then tells Yu to answer the same questions from the same exam, and if he attains a score of more than 90%, then he is free to leave. Yu tries to leave, but Omura threatens to expel him. Yu takes the exam and figures that Omura is holding his previous answer sheet, which he can possess. Yu possesses Omura but finds that he lied to him. He eventually regains consciousness only to find that Tomori Nao has been recording his every move. He tries to deny her claims, but Nao hands him the evidence of how he cheated on all of his exams. Yu runs away from the council. On his way outside, he meets with Jojuro. Jojuro catches up with Yu in an instant and reveals that there are others in this world with special abilities, and his ability is teleportation. He explains that his teleportation has a flaw. He cannot control how far he will teleport. Nao arrives at the scene and reveals her power of invisibility, but it only works on a single target. He figures that all of their abilities have major flaws. Nao then explains that their powers will disappear one day, and until then, they will attend a special high school meant for the supernatural. She demands him to join the student council since Yu has a useful ability that will stop those who misuse their powers. Later, Yu invites Yumi to lunch at her favorite place. He explains that he is transferring to a new school for some complicated reason and won't be able to see her often. Yumi dumps him and bids farewell. Yu, along with his sister Ayumi, transfers to the new school, and the council helps them settle into their new dormitory. As Yu prepares for his new class, he is greeted by the council on his way there. Nao explains that some students might have the potential to develop special abilities and some are born with them. If the government found out about them, they would be misused for things like assassination or research. Yu feels that Nao is exaggerating, but she reveals that her big brother was one of those unfortunate souls. Soon after, the current system was created to protect the students. She tells Yu that the student council was made to keep loose individuals from misusing their powers or giving them a hefty amount for not using them at all. Class begins and Yu introduces himself to the class. He feels as if he is back in his domain, but things don't go as planned as Nao and Jojuro are in his class. Jojuro invites Yu to sit beside him. During lunch, Jojuro flexes his power in the cafeteria to cut the line, destroying half of the cafeteria in the process. Seeing how he gets injured every time he teleports, Yu thinks his powers are half-baked. Yu then notices Nao eating her lunch alone. Jojuro explains that her powers allow her to be invisible to a person she chooses, but the rest of them see her as she is. After seeing how violent she is, everyone started hating her. Nao summons them to the student council office, where a wet, creepy man arrives. He uses his powers to determine the location of a student with photographic powers. Jojuro reveals that he is a comrade who has the power to reveal the location and power of supernatural humans. The council goes to a high school, and after some investigation, Nao finds a suspicious student. Yu uses his powers to look through his belongings and finds few photographs of a fellow student half-naked. The student reveals that he bought them from Udo in Class 2E. Nao finds Udo, the captain of the archery team, and presents him with all the evidence. He tries to blackmail her, but all is lost in front of Yu's ability. He fires an arrow, but it's inadequate when compared to teleportation. Nao explains to him all the things that can happen to him once he is caught and the situation comes to an end. Seeing how curious Yu is about her big brother, she decides to take him along to the hospital. On the way, she reveals that her mother sent both of them to a school where potential students could develop their powers. Her big brother could make air vibrate according to his will. The scientists used him for various experiments, thinking they could jam radio signals and airwaves. After a year, she was allowed to see him, but he was completely changed. After reaching the hospital, Yu finds her brother screaming in agony. Nao explains that he is composing a song as he believes that he is playing a guitar. Nao takes her big brother out for a stroll and reveals that scientists view them as batteries. Once they are powerless, they move on to the next subject. Yu tries to comfort Nao, but she accuses him of being a cheat who isn't capable of sympathy. As night starts to fall, they both return to the school dormitory. Another day at school, Jojuro notices that Yu has been under the weather since class started. He takes him to the cafeteria and treats him with curry. Both comrades chat as they eat, and soon Nao calls them to the student council office. In the office, the wet creepy man walks to the map and points at the individual's current location. But the worrying part is that the individual has two abilities, channeling and pyrokinesis. The team rushes out, but due to the broad location, they are unable to find the person instantly. Nao notices some footprints and comes to the conclusion that a young girl was being chased by an adult. They find a witness who tells them how she saw Yusurin, a popular idol, being chased by a man. Jojuro jumps around with excitement and reveals himself to be a big fond boy of Yusurin, who knows every single detail about her career. Nao takes a look around and finds a suspicious person. The team eventually manage to apprehend him. Nao interrogates him and finds that a production company hired the man to look for Yusurin. While the team is leaving the area, a mysterious man shows up and questions their motives. Nao explains the entire situation to him, but he is hell-bent on seeing proof. After showing him her powers, the man takes him to a nightclub where another man is beside Yusurin. He calls her Misa and tells the council that things are pretty complicated. Nao figures out that Yusurin is unaware of her powers of channeling. On the other hand, Yusurin believes that she has a habit of sleepwalking. Nao then explains to the boys how her powers work. As Nao mentions Misa, Yusurin's personality takes a 180 and she starts to burn everything. The two boys calm her down and reveal that Misa is Yusurin's dead sister. They further explain that Yusurin found evidence of her producer's illegal activities, causing her to be chased by multiple people. Nao assures Misa that she will resolve Yusurin's situation and devises a plan to blackmail her producer. At night, Misa threatens to kill the producer, putting him in a corner. He then begs for his life and promises not to reveal her secret. After everything is settled, Nao advises Misa to let Yusurin transfer to their school. She reveals the secret of her big brother. After hearing it, Misa agrees, but Sho is reluctant to let her go. He tells Misa that he loved her, and he was the one who killed her, but she assures him that it was an accident. Misa tells him to move on and live a happy life. After a long day, all of the student council members, along with Yusurin, returns to the school. As Yu arrives at school, he learns that the news of Yusurin's transfer has already spread. When Yusurin arrives and introduces herself to the class, everyone is ecstatic and filled with curiosity. However, Nao intervenes and escorts Yusurin to the student council room, accompanied by Yu and Jojuro. Jojuro's fangirling continues while the creepy man informs them about a high school boy with telekinesis. Nao shows them footage of the boy's perfect ball pitching during a practice match and reveals that he's using his telekinetic powers to do so. The council visits the boy's school and challenges him to a baseball match. The boy accepts on the condition that he will do anything if they win. Nao plans to use their powers to gain an edge since their baseball team lacks skilled players. However, the opposing team's pitchers are formidable, and their keeper catches Yu's superpowered knuckleball with ease. With the opposing team in the lead, Nao decides to use their powers to level the playing field. She directs Yu to take over the batting position and force a strike at the last moment. Despite their powers, the council is still a few points behind, and it all comes down to Yu's hitting abilities. However, Yu struggles to hit the ball, and after getting 2 strikes, he hits a foul ball each time. The opposing team plans to curve the ball using telekinesis to make it impossible for Yu to hit. Misa intervenes and calls another foul ball, and as the referee calls safe, the council wins the game. After the game, Nao warns the boy not to use his powers again. As the team is leaving, Nao asks Yu to take over the boy's body for an experiment, but she doesn't reveal the reason for her request. Yu is exhausted from seeing how much attention the students are giving Yusurin. Suddenly, a group barges into the classroom and takes Nao away. Curious, Yu follows them and discovers that they are bullying her. Despite feeling helpless due to his own past, he goes with Nao to the student council office where they meet the wet creepy man. He tells them about an individual with the power of flight, which they learn about from a small cult magazine. Nao plans to stake out in the mountains and buy some snacks for the trip. While shopping for groceries, she reveals her plan to have a barbecue. Meanwhile, Yusurin and Jojiro think that Nao and Yu are a perfect couple for each other. The team sets up camp and Nao starts up the barbecue. Yu is worried about attracting attention with the campfire, but the team is unaware of this. At night, Jojiro and Yusurin have fun playing video games while Yu realizes that Nao is missing. He finds her sitting on a cliff listening to music. He wants to hear the song her brother created, and after hearing it, he feels like he is standing alone in a field of grass stretching endlessly. Nao explains that her brother always composed music representing loneliness and is surprised that someone like Yu, who cheats, can understand such deep emotions. She reveals her dream of recording her brother's music video one day, and Yu is speechless as he sees a new expression on her face. In the end, Nao gives Yu the MP3 as a gift. The next day, the group competes in fishing and grills some fish. As the day passes, the girls take a bath while the boys clean themselves up in the river. Yu is impressed by Jojiro's muscular physique, and Jojiro explains that he trained his body to handle his ability. Jojiro is about to reveal something, but he changes the subject. During dinner, Yu wants to go see his sister, but Nao refuses and tells him that they will all stay the night. The next day, a boy shows up and threatens to call the cops on the council. Nao reveals that he has been practicing flight on private property, and she has footage of it on her camera. The boy falls for her trap and uses his flight, but Yu possesses him mid-air and reduces his velocity to stop him from stealing the camera. Nao explains that his powers might vanish in mid-air, and Misa shows her pyrokinesis to prove that he is not alone. The mission ends, and Yu goes home to his sister and eats her delicious food. He finds out that she has a cold and puts her to sleep so she can rest well. Ayumi's fever keeps increasing, and Yu advises her to rest and calls the school to inform them of her absence. He heads to the student council office where the wet creepy man barges in, revealing the location of an individual with the power of collapse. To the council's shock, the location is their condo. Nao explains that parents cannot wield special abilities, so it is likely that someone caught a cold and did not go to school. Yu becomes anxious and tells Nao about his sister, who might awaken her powers if he has awakened his. Nao and Yusurin buy gifts for Ayumi and visit her at home. As they arrive, they find 3 of Ayumi's friends there, and Yu notices something odd about one of the girls. During dinner, Ayumi teases Nao about her and Yu being a couple. Nao warns her about the danger of the collapse ability, and Yu questions her lack of evidence. Nao advises him to keep his sister home for a few days, as there is a high chance she will awaken her powers. The next day, Nao sets up surveillance on the middle school, fearing their lack of evidence could lead to their downfall. She instructs Yu to keep Ayumi home for one more day, but Ayumi sneaks out and goes to school. There she encounters Kanashi, who is jealous of Ayumi, and attacks her with a blade cutter, accusing her of stealing Oikawa from him. As Ayumi unconsciously uses collapse and destroys the building, Yu rushes forward despite Nao's attempt to stop him. Yu wakes up in the hospital and is devastated to learn that his sister has passed away. He spends his days in isolation, consumed by guilt and depression. Despite his friends' attempts to pull him out of his funk, he continues to wallow in his misery and eats only instant ramen. One day, Yumi pays him a visit, but he lashes out at her, pushing her away. Eventually, Yu decides to leave town and takes over the body of a police officer to avoid being recognized. He ends up in a new town and spends his time playing video games at an arcade, becoming a notorious bully beater in the process. However, he becomes addicted to a drug and almost succumbs to its effects until Nao intervenes and saves him. Nao takes Yu to her family's home and prepares him a meal of omu rice, Ayumi's favorite dish that she learned to make from a cookbook left behind by her mother. Overwhelmed by emotion, Yu weeps and decides to return to the student council. Despite the tragedy that has befallen him, Yu begins to rebuild his life with the support of his friends and a newfound appreciation for the little things that bring joy and comfort. Yu gathers himself and heads to school, determined to start anew. His old friends Jojiro and Yusurin welcome him back, but other classmates are jealous of Yusurin's friendly behavior towards him. Yu notices Nao sitting alone in a corner and remembers how she saved him from himself. During lunchtime, Jojiro uses his teleportation to buy curry for them like old times, but their lunch is interrupted when Nao summons them to the office. She forces everyone to watch Yusurin's new music video and then reveals that the creepy man won't be coming that day. Nao invites everyone to a ZN concert, a band Yusurin is unfamiliar with. Nao explains that only one person can attend with her, and after some discussion, Yu is chosen. On his way to school the next day, Yu meets a blind girl named Sala who seems familiar to him. She forces him to take her to a noodle restaurant and reveals that she is the vocalist of Z End. Sala asks about Yu's recent tragic experience, sensing despair emanating from him through his breathing and vocals. Yu tells her the whole story and takes her to Kazuki Tomori's room, where she starts singing a soothing melody that calms Kazuki. Yu is happy to see that Kazuki can recall Yu's name when she's mentioned. Sala tells Yu that he's a kind person and is fortunate to have met some good people. The night ends and Yu is looking forward to Zien's concert. Sala promises to sing while keeping him and his special someone in mind. Naao calls to thank him for helping her big brother, who recognized her for the first time. Yu realizes that Tomori's influence on him has been great, and he's grateful for the good people he's met. The next day, Yu was intimidated by his clothing choice. He cannot understand why he is so indecisive. After trying on a ton of clothes, he finally meets with Nao. Yu is in awe after seeing how beautiful she is. He realizes that Nao is a fond girl through and through. After waiting in a long line, Nao finally buys her long-desired Zien phone case. Yu, for some reason, feels a wave of nostalgia. After a while, Sala sings a new song. It's Yu's first time hearing it, but for some reason, he remembers the lyrics to the song. As the song goes on, Yu starts to recall his memories. He finds himself in a cafe with Ayumi listening to Zien's music and sees an old researcher listening to classical music at the cafe every day. He questions him about being there, to which the researcher reveals that he is lost in thought when he listens to the genre. He explains that if one expresses his strange thoughts, then he is shunned by society, just like him. Yu and Ayumi wait in line to get their curry. He explains that the curry contains supplements to increase their ability. But Ayumi wishes to see her big brother Shun, but Yu tells her that Shun's abilities are too protrusive, thus he's not allowed to spend time with the rest of them. Ayumi questions Shun's ability, to which Yu whispers that his ability is to leap in time, and because of it, he is imprisoned. He thinks to himself that people think his true ability is taking over someone's mind for 5 seconds, but if his true ability were exposed, he would be caught like his brother. Kumigami sits beside him and reveals that he has located a telepath, but he is imprisoned. Yu eases Ayumi's concern by stating that the guards treat them differently due to their brother's extraordinary abilities. After some tests, Ayumi is taken away by the guards while Yu is escorted to a prison cell. In the midst of the night, an earthquake wakes everyone up. Yu finds the old researcher at his door. He reveals that Ayumi's power collapse was forced to awaken. This resulted in D-Block's destruction. The researcher explains that she is being restrained due to her powers, but she will be dissected and thrown away. He forces Yu to use his true ability, Plunderer. Yu rushes to the location of the telepath and steals his ability. On his way to save his brother, Yu takes penetration from his friend and escapes the guards. He then releases his brother, hoping he will change the world. Yu wakes up in the hospital, and Kumigami arrives and reveals himself to be the wet, creepy man. He reveals that all of his questions will melt once he meets Shun, and then Yu will rescue Ayumi with his powers. Nao is surprised to know that Yu is Shun's little brother. Kumigami takes them to their research facility. After meeting with them, Shun starts to reveal the long road he had traveled. He starts off by waking up in his younger body. Shun realizes that in 3 years, all of them will be captured. He waits for Kumigami to find him. After Kumigami approaches Shun, he reveals that they had met in the future and were soul friends. Kumigami takes him to meet the group he has assembled. All 3 members suspect Shun. To ease their suspicion, Shun reveals all of their names and abilities. After gaining their trust, Shun reveals their tragic endings. He had created a syndicate of ability wielders, but in the end, no matter how many of them were there, the results were the same. Shun had started over again many times until he decided that mere children were not enough to accomplish the job. In the end, Shun decides to gather some funds using his abilities to gather all sorts of gambling information. He time leaps again. After waking up, he realizes that his power depletes his vision, but at a slow pace. He explains the entire situation to Kumigami and the others. On his 15th birthday, Shun realizes that the only way to protect the children was to build a school for them. He lets Kumigami in on his plans and reveals that this is their last chance since he will go blind. He wakes up again in the same bed, but this time with all of his vision depleted. After creating the school, Shun wants Kumigami to erase his existence from Yu and Ayumi's minds. He also wants to create similar schools all over Japan. He says one last goodbye to Yu and Ayumi and erases their memory. In the present, Shun apologizes to Nao for not saving her big brother. He tells Yu that something is still left undone, their promise to save Ayumi. Shun wants Yu to take his power of time leaping and save Ayumi. Nao reveals that Jojiro and herself already knew about his power of plundering. She further explains that all the ability wielders he has possessed until now have lost their abilities. Yu then uses his telekinesis, and that's when Shun tells him that his ability is not lost, so he should loot it. He plundered his brother's ability and leaps back in time. Yu goes through the day like he did back then. He explains the entire situation to Nao, who believes him in an instant. He thanks Nao for saving him after Ayumi's death. After she leaves, Yu plunders Ayumi's ability to collapse. The next day, he sends her to school where she was supposed to be killed by a bully. The council saves Ayumi from the bully along with Yu. Kumagami takes Yu and Ayumi to meet with Shun. There, Yu explains the entire situation of how he used Time Leap to save Ayumi from dying. Shun breaks the bad news and tells Yu that he will stay at the facility since his powers are too immense. The head of their research team explains to Yu that their powers were awakened due to the Charlotte, a rare comet that passes by the Earth every 400 years. The particles released in the atmosphere cause superhuman abilities to awaken. The researchers reveal that they have developed a drug to counter this, but it will only work on those who have not awakened their abilities yet. Shun explains that there are people all around the world being slain in the name of witch hunt, and he plans to save them all. While playing, Kumagami finds another ability wielder and plans to go to the council, but refuses to take Yu with him. On his way, his driver Furuki reveals that his family is held hostage and he needs to take Kumagami to another location. He takes Kumagami to a remote location, where he is injected with a truth serum. The mysterious organization questions him about all the physics they are hiding. He ends up revealing everything to them. The criminals give Shun a call, stating to exchange himself for Kumagami and Furuki's family. If he uses his time leap, then both of them will perish. Shun contacts Furuki in agony and explains that his family was held hostage before the academy was made. Shun assures him that his family will be safe. He calls for a meeting and explains that he made a bad call. He knew about Furuki's family but allowed him to join anyway. After some deep thinking, all of them decide to let Yu handle the situation since Yu can plunder their abilities or time leap if he messes up. Shun explains the entire plan to Yu, but he is in doubt of himself. Without realizing, Yu activates Collapse, but Shun calms him down before any major damage. After thinking for a while, Yu is determined to save Nao. He goes to a remote location, where he is attacked by an ability wielder who slashes his eye. Yu is unable to time leap with just one eye and is forced to use Collapse. In the midst of chaos, Shun and the others are confused as to why Yu is using Collapse. They rush towards the building, but things do not seem good. As they look through the rubble, they find that Yu used telekinesis to control the rubble, but he could not save Kumagami. As he dies in Shun's arms, he begs him not to leave his side. Yu wakes up in the hospital after major surgery only to find the harsh truth that Kumagami has died. The crew blames him for his incompetence to save others, but the doctor reminds them that they were the ones who decided to leave everything up to Yu. She reveals that both sides made miscalculations. Shun, on the other hand, has shunned himself from the world since Kumagami was his best friend. Later, Jojiro and Yusurin pay a visit to Yu along with some provisions. He forces Misa to meet with her parents before Yusurin's powers fade. She decides to host a cooking show and showcase her parents' food. While recording, Misa takes over and meets her parents one last time. Ayumi comes by to wish Yu a happy 16th birthday. As a gift, she brings him his favorite omu rice. After being able to walk, Yu goes to the rooftop where he finds Shun staring at the vast sky. He recalls himself and Shun after Ayumi died. In response, Shun reveals that the terrorists have started to act and Japan will soon be a part of it. In his room, he finds Nao, who explains that he should plunder all the abilities in the world, but she is unaware of what will happen next. While Nao leaves the room, Yu tells her that he will plunder all the abilities to save her. Nao questions his motive, to which he reveals that he loves her. Yu promises her that he will return and they will become lovers after he saves every ability wielder in the world. Before leaving, he pays one last visit to the rooftop. He explains his plans to Shun and proves his determination. While leaving, Yu takes Jojiro's teleportation, Mrs. Pyrokinesis, and Yusurin's channeling. After stealing a multitude of abilities, Yu comes across one with the search ability, making his mission much easier. Day in and day out, he hunts down ability users and frees them from their curse. As he continues to plunder abilities, he gains the moniker of the One-Eyed Grim Reaper. Soon he starts learning new abilities without even knowing their names, which he explains to Shun. Later, he discovers a camp where many are affected by Charlotte, but their abilities have not yet awakened. Yu decides to use his new ability to force their awakening. He then stumbles upon a healing ability and wonders if he can use it to heal his own eye and travel back in time to save Kumagami, but his determination prevents him from doing so. Yu discovers that his abilities go on a rampage and destroy the surrounding area while he sleeps. Upon waking up, he is unable to remember what happened. Slowly but surely, he starts forgetting everything, even the promise he made to Nano. He travels the world, plundering abilities one after the other, gradually losing his sanity with each acquisition. He ends up fighting military and mafia groups in various cities and even traverses vast deserts to complete his mission. As he finds the last ability user, he is shot in the back, but a young girl saves him with her power of courage. After successfully stealing the last known ability, Yu collapses from exhaustion. The council then brings him back to Japan, and upon waking up, Yu reveals that he has forgotten about Nao. She informs him that she made the flashcards as a parting gift and that she is his lover. Yu tells her that the flashcards were like a good luck charm that helped him get through it all. Nao, along with everyone else, decides to make new memories with Yu. The end.